My mother-in-law poured something strange into my drink when she thought I wasn't looking special cocktail for my favorite son-in-law, she said with a smile. I thanked her and discreetly switched glasses with her husband, who always criticized my career. 45 minutes later, my name is Julian Mercer, 30 years old, independent photographer based in Asheville, North Carolina. I've built my business from nothing. Weddings, wildlife, magazine spreads, the kind of work that pays the bills if you're good at it, and I am but to my in-laws, especially Diane. What I do has never been enough. How's the little photography hobby? Gerald would ask at family dinners, not even trying to hide his disdain. He was an investment banker, the kind of man who measured success in square footage and stock options. Every Sunday dinner at their house was the same. Diane would fuss over her daughter while Gerald interrogated me about my finances. My wife, Haley, would squeeze my hand under the table, a silent apology for her parents. I'd been shooting a wildlife assignment in Montana all week, trudging through knee snow to photograph bison for National Geographic. I was exhausted, but Haley insisted we couldn't miss her mother's birthday. Dinner just a couple hours, she promised. I should have listened to that knot in my stomach when Diane cornered me in the kitchen, the way her eyes darted around before she handed me that drink, the slight tremor in her fingers as she said, I made it special just for you. Something wasn't right. I just didn't know how wrong it was about to get. Haley and I met 6 years ago at an art exhibition where my work was featured. She was finishing her master's in environmental science, and I was just starting to make a name for myself. We connected instantly. She understood my need to capture the world through a lens, and I admired her passion for protecting it. Her parents were another story from our first meeting. Gerald made it clear he had expected someone different for his daughter, someone with a desk job, a retirement plan, a company car, someone exactly like him. Diane was subtler. She'd praise my photos while asking when I planned to settle into something stable. She'd invite me to family functions, then introduce me as the photographer instead of her son-in-law. For years, I tried to win them over. I'd bring expensive wine to dinner, show them published work, mention high-profile clients. Nothing changed. Their perception that I was just passing through their daughter's life, a phase she'd outgrow. Last Christmas, I overheard Diane on the phone. Haley could have married Thomas, orthopedic surgeon, family money, but she chose the creative one. The way she paused before creative made it sound like a disease. Gerald was more direct. When Haley and I announced we were trying for a baby, he pulled me aside. Children are expensive, son. Maybe think about real employment before bringing one into the world. I never told Haley these things. She loved her parents despite their flaws, and I didn't want to force her to choose sides, so I smiled, shook Gerald's hand firmly at every visit, complimented Dean's cooking, and kept my thoughts to myself. But there were signs I should have taken more seriously. The way Diane would ask Haley to help in the kitchen whenever I talked about a successful project, how she'd accidentally exclude me from family photos. The time Gerald suggested therapy for Haley's impulsive decisions while looking directly at me, I ignored it all, thinking time would eventually bring acceptance. I was wrong. The Friday of Diane's birthday dinner, I returned from Montana with raw windbur cheeks and a memory card full of images that would pay our mortgage for 3 months. I was bone tired but showered, put on a button-down shirt, and drove us to her parents' colonial-style home in the expensive part of town. Dinner started normally. Gerald bragged about a recent deal. Diane fussed over the table settings. Haley's brother, Owen, and his wife, Vanessa, made polite conversation. I nursed a beer and counted the minutes until we could leave. After the main course, Diane announced she'd made her famous sangria. For dessert, she disappeared into the kitchen, and I offered to help carry glasses. That's when I saw it. She had 2 glasses separate from the others. As I entered, she quickly added something from a small vial into one of them. It wasn't a garnish or flavor. It was colorless, odorless, and she tucked the vial away the moment she heard my footsteps. Oh, Julian, I've got this, she said too brightly. This one's for you. Special recipe for my favorite son-in-law. My throat tightened. The glass had a barely perceptible film floating on top, catching the light. Let me help. You carry these, I said, taking both glasses she'd prepared in the dining room. Gerald was checking his phone, barely looking up. When I approached sangria, sir, I placed the tampered glass in front of him. Instead of taking it myself, I watched him drink, making an excuse about preferring water with my dessert. 45 minutes later, Gerald was pale, sweating, and rushing to the bathroom. The violent sounds of his illness echoed through the house. Diane's face drained of color when she realized what had happened. Her eyes met mine across the table, and in that moment I knew 2 things with absolute certainty. My mother-in-law had tried to poison me, and she knew that I knew. I didn't react, didn't confront her, just ate my chocolate cake while Haley rushed to check on her father. In the chaos that followed, Gerald insisting it must have been food poisoning, Diane stammering about bad shellfish. I quietly pocketed the untouched glass meant for me. Something had shifted inside me. The anger I felt wasn't hot or explosive. It was cold, deliberate. I wasn't just going to let this go, but I wasn't going to fight their way either. I was going to make them face exactly who they were. The Monday after the dinner, I took the glass to Jason, a former client who ran a toxic psychology lab, personal or professional. He asked when I explained what I needed. Family matter. I replied. 3 days later, he called Julian. There were benzodiazepines. In that drink, nothing lethal, but enough to knock someone out for hours, maybe. Cause some memory loss? Where did you get it? This, I thanked him and asked for a written report. I didn't answer his question that night. I told Haley I wanted to skip Sunday dinner for a while. Said I needed to focus on an upcoming EEX. Idion, she was disappointed, but understood. I didn't tell her about the test results. Not yet. I needed more information first over the next 2 weeks. I did some digging. Diane had a prescription for Xanax from 3 different doctors. She'd been doubling and tripling her doses for years there. Were also rumors about her in town. Strange behavior at a neighbor party. Accusations of stealing jewelry at her. Country club stories her family had. Worked hard to bury. I compiled everything and waited for my moment. It came when Haley mentioned her mother needed photos for a social media profile. She specifically asked if you would take them. Haley said, surprised by the request. I agreed. The following Saturday, I arrived at their house, a lone camera bag. In one hand, a sealed envelope. In the other, Diane was waiting, dressed, expensively makeup perfect. Gerald was at the office, she explained before we start. I said quietly, I thought you might want to see this. I handed her the envelope, containing the toxicology report along with printouts of her multiple prescriptions. Her hands trembled as she read. This is absurd, she whispered. I would never. We both know what happened. I cut her off. What I don't know is why. Her face hardened. You're not good enough for my daughter. You never will be. A man should provide security, not pictures and drugging your daughter's husband. Provide security. I kept my voice level. It wasn't going to hurt you, she snapped. Just make you sick. Make you miss that ridiculous gallery opening you've been talking about for months. Show Haley that you're unreliable. I let that sink in. Here's what happens next, I said finally. You're going to tell Gerald what you did then. You're both going to start treating me with respect, not because you've suddenly changed your minds about me, but because the alternative is Haley finding out exactly who her parents are. Diane laughed, but it sounded hollow. Sheck, never believe you. Over us, I picked up my camera bag, maybe? Not, but she'll believe the lab report and the prescription records and the neighbors you've alienated. Are you willing to bet your relationship with your daughter on that I left without taking a single photo that night? Diane called Haley in, tears, claiming I'd behaved inappropriately during our session. Said I'd been hostile and threatening. When Haley confronted me, I couldn't hide the truth anymore. I showed her everything. The lab report, the prescriptions, even text messages from her mother that had become increasingly hostile over the years. My mother wouldn't do this, she kept saying, but her voice lacked conviction. The next day, she confronted her parents. I wasn't there, but when she returned home, her eyes were red from crying. My father says it's all a misunderstanding, she said quietly, that trying to drive a wedge between us because you're insecure about your career. I just nodded. I'd expected this. What do you think? I asked. She didn't answer, just crawled into bed and turned away from me. I'd pushed back, but somehow I'd fallen deeper into their trap now. I was the villain in their story, and they'd managed to plant doubt in the one person whose opinion mattered most to me for 2 weeks. Haley barely spoke to me. She went to her parents' house alone, came back with red eyes and new doubt. I threw myself into work, spending long hours in my studio waiting for the storm to pass. Then a package arrived for me. No. Return address, just my name scrolled across the top in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a USB drive and a note. You should see this viable quote, Vanessa, Owen's wife. The drive contained video, files, home security footage from Gerald and Diane's house. The timestamp showed the night of the dinner. There was Diane in the kitchen, clearly adding something to a drink. There was me entering, taking the glasses. There was Gerald drinking from the tampered glass, but there was more footage from after we'd left. Diane screaming at Gerald, blaming him for drinking from the wrong glass. Gerald yelling back, this isn't the first time you've done something like this. I watched the footage 3 times, trying to process what I was seeing, not just confirmation of Diane's actions, but evidence of a pattern. Evidence that Gerald knew. The next file was from 2 days after the dinner. Diane and Gerald argued in their living room about me. He knows what you did, Gerald said. So what? Diane replied. It's his word against mine. Haley will never choose him over family, and if she does, then she's not the daughter I raised, Diane said coldly. Don't worry, I've already started talking to her about their marriage problems, planting seeds. By the time I'm done, she'll be filing for divorce and thinking it was her idea. I shut my laptop, hands shaking. This wasn't just about me. This was a systematic effort to control Haley's life, to isolate her from anyone who didn't fit their vision, and they'd been doing it for years. I called Vanessa immediately. Why did you send this to me? because they did the same thing to me. When I married Owen, she said quietly, they tried to break us up for 2 years. Said I wasn't good enough, it almost worked. Why didn't you tell us, Owen? Doesn't know she admitted he worships. His father believes everything he says. I've tried to tell him, but he thinks I'm paranoid. I just couldn't watch them do it to someone else the next day. I received a text from Gerald. We should talk man to man. No. Wives. I met him at his country club. He was waiting in a private room drinking bourbon. Julian, he began, families are complicated, my wife. She can be difficult, protective, but she means well. Drugging. Someone means well, I asked. He waved his hand dismissively. Misunderstanding. Diane takes medication. For anxiety, she probably mixed up the glasses. I have the security footage. Gerald, his face changed instantly, hardening into something cold and calculating. What do you want? Money? Is that what this is about? I always knew you married Haley for financial reasons. I want you both to leave us alone, I said. Simply stop trying to convince Haley I'm not good enough. Stop interfering in our marriage. Gerald leaned forward. You think? This is the first time we've dealt with someone like you, people who want to take advantage of our family. He laughed. Haley will come home where she belongs. She always does. Ask her about Thomas. Asked her about the fiancé before. You. I felt cold. What are you talking about? Haley was engaged before she met you. Nice guy doctor. We didn't like his background. Took us 6 months to convince her he was wrong for her. She broke it off. Came home crying to daddy. He smiled. History repeats. Son, on the drive home, I called Haley's college roommate Bethany. Asked her about Thomas. Oh God, she said, that was awful. He was perfect for her. But her parents, they convinced her he was cheating. Planted evidence. He tried to tell her the truth. But by then, she didn't trust him anymore. The pattern was clear. Now this wasn't just about me. It was about control, complete control over their daughter's life, and they'd done it before. I didn't confront Haley immediately. Instead, I started gathering every piece of evidence I could find. I reached out to Thomas, who was initially reluctant to speak with me. When I explained the situation, he sent me old emails between him and Haley showing how her parents had systematically undermined their relationship. I contacted other ex-boyfriends, old friends of Haley's, who'd mysteriously drifted away. A pattern emerged. Anyone who encouraged Haley's independence was gradually pushed out of her life. Vanessa provided more security footage showing Diane and Gerald discussing their plans for us. Once they divorce, we'll convince her to move back home, Gerald said in one clip. She can run the foundation, meet suitable men. I compiled everything onto a single drive. Then I invited Owen and Vanessa over for dinner without telling Haley I was about to destroy her family's image. Over dessert, I connected my laptop to our TV. There's something you both need to see, I said. For the next hour, we watched the footage together. Haley sat motionless, her face pale. Owen kept shaking his head, muttering, that's not my parents, under his breath. When it was over, Haley turned to me with tears streaming down her face. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I needed you to see for yourself. I said all of it, not just what they did to me, but what they've been doing to you your entire life. Owen stood up, furious. This is you've edited these videos. My parents wouldn't do this. Vanessa touched his arm. They did it to us too, Owen. Why do you think they suddenly started liking me after we had James? Because a grandchild meant they had leveraged. The color drained from Owen's face. You never told me I tried. She whispered you wouldn't listen. Later that night, Haley crawled into bed beside me. I need time to process this. She said softly, but I believe you, and I'm sorry I doubted you. The next morning, Diane called Haley. Put her on speaker. Darling, I was thinking you should come stay with us for a while, Diane said cheerfully. Your father and I are worried about you. Marriage is hard, and sometimes separation can give clarity. Mom, Haley interrupted. I've seen the videos. Silence. Then what? Videos, the security footage of you drugging Julian's drink, of you and Dad plotting to break up my marriage. Another pause. Haley, whatever he's shown you has been manipulated. You know Julian has always been jealous of our family. Stop. Haley's voice was firm. We're coming over tonight, all of us. Owen, Vanessa, Julian, and me, we're going to talk about this as a family, no more lies. After she hung up, Haley turned to me. They'll deny everything. They'll try to turn this around on you. I nodded. No. So what's our plan for the first time in weeks? I smiled. I think it's time your parents met the real me. The one who doesn't just take photos but knows how to tell a story. That night we arrived at Gerald and Diane's house with my camera equipment. Owen and Vanessa were already there, sitting stiffly in the living room. Gerald seemed confident. I understand there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I interrupted, setting up my tripod. I'm documenting this conversation for the family archives. Diane objected immediately. This is private family business. Exactly. agreed family business and I'm family. Even though you've tried very hard to change. That for the next 2 hours we laid it all. Out the drink, the manipulation, Tom. The other ex-boyfriends, the pattern that had shaped Haley and Owen's entire lives. Gerald and Diane denied everything of course called me unstable manipulative. But with each denial I played another. Clip showed another email their faces. Grew paler, their denials. Weaker. Finally, Haley stood up. I love you both. You're my parents, but what you've done is unforgivable. You don't get to control my life anymore. Owen nodded. We're adults. We choose our own partners, our own path. Diane started crying, not from remorse, but from the realization that she was losing control. Gerald just looked stunned, as if he couldn't comprehend that his children were defying him. As we prepared to leave, I handed Gerald a USB drive. This contains everything, the footage, the emails, the testimonies. It's yours too. Keep. What's that supposed to mean? He asked. Suspiciously, it means that I'm not going to ruin your reputation by sharing this with anyone else that would hurt Haley. And I would never do that. I paused, but if you ever try to interfere in our marriage again, if you ever try to manipulate Haley or speak against me, copies will go to every member of your country club, your business partners, and your precious social circle. For the first time since I'd met him, Gerald looked at me with something resembling respect. I underestimated you. Yes, I said simply. You did. 6 months passed. Haley and Owen began therapy to work through the damage their parents had caused. Diane and Gerald kept their distance, sending occasional texts, but respecting the boundaries we'd established. Then, over the holidays, they invited us all to dinner, a fresh start. The invitation read, Haley wanted to go. Still my parents, she said, and they're trying. I agreed, but I wasn't naive enough to believe they changed. When we arrived, everything seemed normal. Diane had prepared a feast. Gerald was charming, asking about my latest projects. With what appeared to be genuine interest. After dinner, Gerald invited me into his study. I have a proposition for you, he said, pouring me a scotch. I've been thinking about your career. Photography as well. It's been good to you, but have you considered diversifying? I could bring you into my firm. Junior partner track. The salary would be substantial. I took the glass, but didn't drink. Why would you do that? Your family, he said smoothly, and I respect how you handled the unpleasantness. You protected my daughter while standing your ground. That's what a be real man. Does. I set the glass down, untouched. I appreciate the offer, but no. His smile tightened. Julian, be reasonable. This is an olive branch away for us to move forward. No, I repeated. It's another attempt at control. You can't buy me, Gerald, and you can't stand the fact that Haley loves me exactly as I am. Don't be a fool, he hissed, dropping the facade. Everyone has a price. I stood up. That's where you're wrong, and that's why you'll never understand your daughter. I walked back to the dining room where Diane was showing Haley photo albums. Look at these, she was saying. You were so happy when you lived at home. Haley caught my eye across the room. She could see from my expression that something had happened. I gave a slight nod and she stood up. Mom, Dad, she announced clearly, I have something to tell you. Everyone turned to look at her. We're having a baby, Julian and I. I'm 3 months pregnant. The shock on their faces was genuine. Diane recovered first, rushing to embrace her daughter with tears in her eyes. Gerald approached more slowly, glancing between Haley and me. Congratulations, he said stiffly. Thank you, replied, then lowering my voice so only he could hear. This child will never be a pawn in your games, I promise you. That his face hardened, but he nodded once he understood the message. As we drove home that night, Haley squeezed my hand. They'll never change, Will. They know, I said honestly, but they'll have to accept that we have. 3 weeks later, a certified letter arrived from Gerald's attorney. Inside was a deed to a house, our house, which we'd been renting, and legal documents establishing a trust fund for our unborn child. There was no note, no conditions, no strings, just the transfer of assets, clean and irrevocable. It wasn't an apology. Gerald wasn't capable of that, but it was an acknowledgement, perhaps the only one he could give that we had. When our daughter was born in summer, we named her Eliza after my grandmother. When Diane and Gerald came to the hospital, they brought gifts but maintained a respectful distance. They CED over the baby, took photos, and left without trying to give us parenting advice or financial lectures. Months past our relationship with them settled into something resembling normally. They never apologized for what they'd done, but they stopped trying to control Haley's life or undermine my career. One evening, as I was editing photos in my studio, Haley came in carrying Eliza. My mother called. She said she wants us to come for Christmas. I looked up from my computer. What do you want to do? I think we should go, she replied, but with conditions. We stay at a hotel, not their house. We leave when we want to leave. No Eunice time with Eliza. I nodded. Sounds reasonable. She sat down beside me, bouncing the baby gently. You know, I used to think success meant making my parents happy, getting their approval, meeting their expectations, and now she looked down at our daughter, then back at me. Now I know it's about making choices. I can be proud of standing by the people I love. 2 weeks before Christmas, a large envelope arrived from Gerald. Inside was a glossy brochure for his company's annual report. My photographs were featured throughout landscapes, portraits, architectural shots, the work I'd done on my own terms without his interference. There was a brief note: hired the best photographer I know. Thought you'd want a copy, GBL quoted. Wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, it was something else. Respect, perhaps the acknowledgement that I was successful on my own terms, not his. I didn't call to thank him. We both understood this wasn't about gratitude, it was about recognizing the new boundaries, the new reality. That spring, I opened my own gallery in downtown Enville. At the grand opening, Haley stood beside me, Eliza on her hip. My parents flew in from Oregon, friends and clients filled the space, admiring the images I'd captured over the years. Gerald and Diane came too toward the end of the evening. They didn't stay long. Diane held Eliza briefly under Haley's watchful eye. Gerald shook my hand, nodded at the photographs with genuine approval, and left without making any suggestions about how I should run my business. As we locked up that night, Haley asked, "Do you think they've changed?" I considered the question. Carefully, no, I said finally, but they've accepted that they can't change us, and sometimes that's enough. Later, as we sat on our porch, watching the stars come out over the mountains, Eliza asleep in her crib. Upstairs, I realized something and never fully articulated before. I hadn't won by playing Gerald and Diane's game. I'd won by refusing to play it at all. I'd stood my ground, protected what mattered, and built my life according to my own definition of success, not with schemes or manipulation, but with honesty and quiet persistence. In the end, that was the most satisfying revenge of all, living well on my own terms with the family I loved beside me.